Good afternoon, everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to what is truly a landmark occasion, not only for my own university, the University of Limerick, but for each of the distinguished institutions united through the eMERGE Alliance. Today represents more than the formal launch of a strategic partnership. It marks a powerful step forward in how we collectively reimagine higher education, research, and most importantly, the student experience. Allow me to briefly introduce myself. My name is Ronan Cahill, and I have had the privilege of serving as the student president of UL Student Life, which is the students' union here in UL. As I conclude what have been the most rewarding 2 years of my life, advocating for and representing the students of this university, it is a genuine honour to help open today's event. To be part of this moment as we set the foundation for deeper collaboration across our institutions is incredibly meaningful. But what excites me most is the impact this alliance will have on students, current and future. Through eMERGE, new doors will be open, more diverse opportunities, broader academic pathways, and a more interconnected European learning experience. That is the legacy we begin to build today. I look forward to a day of reflection, celebration, and shared ambition as we explore what this alliance means for our institutions, but above all, what it will mean for our students. And now, without further ado, it is my great pleasure to invite our Acting President, Professor Shane Kilcommons, to say a few words.
Thanks, Ronan, for the lovely introduction and indeed for your work with us over the last 2 years. It's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to the University of Limerick and to the official launch of eMERGE, our European University Alliance. Today, I think, marks the formal beginning of the partnership, but it has been many months in gestation. It marks a shared commitment to build a more connected and more inclusive European future. Today, we also signed the consortium agreement with the governing board. I'm really grateful to all of our colleagues who were at that meeting and to Professor Colin Fitzpatrick. I think that the discussions around that commitment to empowering marginalised communities and to building around those 7 key values and how we can use them in the 9 institutions across the 7 countries. At UL, we're very proud to be a member of this ambitious alliance. Proud also to stand alongside our partners from across Europe, each of us bringing different strengths, languages and traditions, but united by a common vision to reimagine what higher education can be when it is truly collaborative, transnational and values-driven. One of the things that struck me today from the meeting that we had earlier was that key focus on impact. What impact can we have? How can we add value through this alliance? And I think that's something that is very much in the minds of all of the institutions. One of the defining principles of eMERGE, as I mentioned, is that commitment to empowering at the margins, to reaching beyond the traditional centres of influence. Whether we're talking about geographical peripheries, social exclusion, or academic underrepresentation, eMERGE is designed to challenge the idea that excellence only lives at the core. It is, in this regard, a truly inclusive project, and I'm very confident that all of the institutions can be a voice for that marginalisation. Innovation does happen at the edges, and this alliance will ensure that those edges are not isolated, but interconnected, energised and empowered. We're also deeply committed to plurilingualism, not just as a skill, but also as a value. In eMERGE, we celebrate linguistic diversity as a foundation of European identity and intellectual richness. It is also much more than about translation. It is about mutual understanding, respect, and the ability to learn with and from one another in different cultural and linguistic contexts. Language is where inclusion begins, and it's a key anchoring point. And crucially, and I think this is very important, eMERGE is a whole of university alliance. This is not a project confined to specific disciplines or specific areas of expertise. It is a shared understanding that reaches into every faculty and every professional support service. And so what it's doing is it's recognising the worth, the value and potential of all disciplines and all knowledge that has been exchanged in the various institutions. It calls on our collective imagination and invites every part of our university community to participate. There's an old Irish proverb, and it reads as follows: "Ar scá a céile a bhar na daoine," and it roughly translates is that we live in each other's shadows. And I think that this alliance extols those values of connection, of sharing human successes and failures together, of living in each other's shadows. We are living in a time of collaboration when it is actually essential. Our Chancellor, Professor Bridget Laffan, will shortly speak to you very eloquently and very insightfully about that sense of collaboration, but also about the future of higher education in Europe. So to our partners, I wish to thank you for your trust and your vision and for being present with us today. To our students and staff, thank you for your energy, your ideas, and your belief in what we can achieve together. And to our European colleagues and supporters, thank you for investing in alliances like Emerge, not just as educational projects, but as living demonstrations of European unity in action. My wish now is that the launch will be the first of many milestones, and that it will lead to richer and deeper collaborations and friendships. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. We will now have a musical performance by UL students Ida Anderson and Simon Crehan, who will also just briefly introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Ida Andersen. I am a Danish student in the Irish World Academy. I study the BA in Irish Trad, going into 4th year. And here on my left, we have Simon Crehan, who studies with me and who I'm also lucky enough to live with. Yes, and as an international, he has been very good for teaching the rest of us in the house. We are a group of internationals there, about Irish culture and about Irish music, apart from being a great guitarist. So first we will play an air, an Irish air that I learned back in Denmark, and then a reel called Julia Delaney's that I have worked on here with my tutor, John Cardy. Yes.
Thank you very much to Ida and Simon for that wonderful performance. So I would now like to welcome UL Chancellor, Professor Bridget Laffan, who will speak on the future of European higher education.
Presidents, distinguished guests and colleagues, I obviously didn't quite get the brief, but I was asked to firstly situate where Europe finds itself now, what kind of world, and then what that means to universities. So I'm not sure I'm going to say all that much about the future of higher education, but I will say something. So where does Europe find itself now? There's no doubt that this part of the world has found itself in a series of crises, almost relentless crises, since the late to first decade of the 21st century, since the global financial crisis, followed by a migration crisis, Brexit, pandemic. And during this time, the EU has been tested and contested, tested in terms of its policy capacity, its institutional capacity, and contested in terms of the project itself, its legitimacy, its capacity to deliver to Europe's peoples. It became, during this time, a more politicized system, a tougher system, more politics and less diplomacy. And that Europe emerged from the pandemic and had achieved with the Recovery Fund probably one of the big breakthroughs in European integration, emerged from the pandemic and almost immediately into what is really testing it now, and that's the return of war to the continent. The overall outright invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 is something that has enormous repercussions for this continent and for the wider world. Again, the EU and Europe responded with resilience and responded robustly to that. The sanctions imposed on Russia are among the most severe ever imposed in history, in fact. And there was very significant support for the Ukrainian population in terms of the temporary residence directive. But all of that exposed Europe's extraordinary vulnerability in defence and security. And this was sharply revealed in 2025 when Europe finds itself in the world of Trump 2. And this is a world that Europe is ill-equipped to deal with. Europe is, in its DNA, it was a peace project, but also multilateralism and law. The EU does lawfare, but is not so comfortable with warfare. And that world of a rules-based international order, a world of cooperation, is not the world that Europe finds itself in now. We're back in a world of, firstly, deep structural change, the dual transition with digital and climate, but also power. The power balances in our world have shifted very significantly. We're back in a world of great power competition. We're back in a world in which there is no hegemon, and the great irony of Trump's MAGA is that making America great again will actually weaken the United States and weaken its capacity to influence what happens in the world. And the EU and Europe finds itself in a position where it must now have another step change in its capability and capacity to deal with the world beyond. The von der Leyen and Antonio Costa leadership, they just took over on the 1st of December 2024, and we're only in June, and we've already seen the first European Commissioner for Defence, we've seen a strategic compass, a competitiveness compass, and also the EU had its first white paper on defence. All of that happening at breakneck speed. But despite that, it's still not fast enough. Speed is a quality of its own, And Europe will always struggle because of 27 member states, will always struggle to do what is necessary within timeframes that will work. And so the EU now finds itself again in a world where geopolitics and geoeconomics are completely intertwined. Europe always liked a world in which NATO provided the nuclear umbrella and relative security, and then the EU was free to trade with the world. But now geoeconomics and geosecurity are completely intertwined. And the next 3 weeks, and it's hard to think it's only 3 weeks. In the next 3 weeks, there will be a NATO summit, and by the 6th of July, either the EU has a trade agreement with the United States or we're in uncharted territory. And that's just 3 weeks, and we do not know what the outcomes of that are. And then pile on to that what we're seeing on our television screens with the escalation of the Israeli-Iran conflagration, India-Pakistan, what's happening in Gaza. In other words, we are increasingly living in a world where the purchase of international law is greatly weakened, and we're beginning to see a world of might is right. So the whole geostrategic, geopolitical environment in which all of our universities work is changing very significantly. And if I could use the term emerge, Europe must emerge from this with adequate capability to have some control over its own future. The choice is pretty stark. Does Europe want to be a plaything for the rest of the world, or a player in determining what the next world order looks like? Because what we can certainly say with a level of accuracy is that the contemporary post-war system that lasted for a very long time is under extraordinary strain. There is multilateralism in the system, there is international law, but it is very fractured and under enormous strain with extraordinary cleavages. And the cleavages aren't just outside Europe, they're within Europe. There are powers, there are governments in Europe today that one would be hard pushed to say were liberal democratic governments. And that's something, again, that should worry all of us. So Europe is in one of those extraordinary transitional periods, or Max Weber called switching times in history, where the change is accelerating and it is profound. And so for universities, how do universities position themselves, and how do we deal with that world that Europe is facing? The one thing we can say about universities is that they are very resilient as institutions. These are institutions that began from Europe's monastic tradition and began to emerge in the 11th century and onwards. And many of those old universities established over a millennium ago are still operating as seats of learning and seats of research. So what we can, even though the university, or the idea of the university, has gone through many different formations over time, the university as an idea and an ideal survives. And therefore, we are custodians of very valuable institutions, of absolutely crucial institutions in our societies. And we must know that, and we must treat our custodianship with extraordinary care. Of course, universities now face multiple challenges and are required to fulfill multiple objectives. They are, from a government-state point of view, and also an EU point of view, universities are seen as the core nodes in the knowledge economy, training the scientists, the technologists of the future. But of course, a knowledge economy must also be a knowledge society, and our universities are also required to enrich not just our economies, but our societies. And also, education is seen rightly as one of the key pathways to social mobility, as one of the ways of social progress, and that has to continue. And therefore, the widening of access to higher education is a mark of a civilized society. But also, education isn't just a means of socioeconomic progression, but it must also, in our multicultural world, be a source of integration, societal integration as well. And governments want universities to do all of this, but they don't necessarily want to fund it. Again, right across Europe, universities, their budgets are strained as there are more and more demands. They've become much more bureaucratic, much more bureaucratic, and required, the regulatory framework is much more demanding. And then we find that there are direct frontal attacks on universities, particularly at the moment in the United States. It is extraordinary that a country that has had, in the post-war period, economic dynamism and societal dynamism and research, cutting-edge, ground, path-breaking research, that is the country in which there is a direct frontal attack on universities. And no university is safe in the United States at the moment, not even the Ivy League. And Harvard, with its enormous endowment, an endowment that those of us who've worked our lives in European higher education, the figures are just astounding. It can't protect itself from that frontal attack. And it's not just an attack on the universities, but of course it's also an attack on research. And so universities have become sites again for political contestation. That's not new, that's very old. But that direct frontal attack that we see in the United States is not something that one could have or would have predicted. And there's no doubt that wherever you have a strong radical right, the radical right are suspicious of universities and will want to clip the wings of universities. Can I also say something about managerialism? There has been, again, it's one of my experiences, I'm now a retired academic, something I observed right through my career, and that was a growing managerialism in our university system. I fundamentally believe that universities cannot be managed, they can only be led. And leading means creating the conditions in which students and scholars flourish, that's what it's about. You aren't going to get managerialism and bureaucratization of universities absorbs enormous energy, but won't give you the flourishing that it needs. I also worry, I must say, that the collegiality, which for me is one of the core values of academia, is being eroded, and it's being eroded because of the pressures on individual academics of one kind or another. And there are also tensions in our universities between the need to deliver high-quality education, but also high-quality research. And managing these balances requires an almost constant attention to the balances and to ensuring, it's almost like a garden. You plant and you prune, and you're trying to create the best conditions for growth. On academic freedom, again, you will not have creativity if you hollow out academic freedom. You will not have quality research. You will not have respectful discussion and disagreement unless the conditions for deliberation are there. And I would finally say that autonomy of the university system must go right down the line. It's not autonomy of the institution, it is also the autonomy of the individual academic or groups of academics and their right to challenge orthodoxy, right down the line. And again, it's important to state what should be obvious to us, but we need to remind ourselves that we are custodians of these great institutions, and therefore they must be nurtured and cared for and well governed and well led. In terms of, I was very intrigued when I read about this University Alliance, and I have again a feature of my experience, because I happen to be, for good or ill, an EU specialist, is to see the way in which education infiltrated into the EU policy landscape and was deepened. Because in the 1960s and well into the 1970s, education was national. It was not European, and member governments, and in this case it was particularly France, did not want educational cooperation in the EU in case it undermined the national structure of education and the importance of education to states and state building and state management. But gradually, beginning with research and development, and then with Erasmus Plus and the Monet programme and all the other programmes, slowly but surely the level of connectivity, the Europeanisation of the higher education system happened. Mobility became the norm. Joint accreditation became much more common, and movement across our university system was greatly strengthened. And then in 2019, the Commission developed its European University Alliances. And one of the other things I might say is that the Commission has managed to get an extraordinary response from European universities by putting very little money on the table. Money as an incentive, I call it the honeypot, and then universities are adaptable, they're agile, and all universities want to be part of something like a European University Alliance. And Emerge is very distinctive, empowering the margins of Europe, the values, inclusion, solidarity, plurilingualism, multiculturalism, sustainability. These are all essential to the future. And the range of universities involved, from the north, the west, the south, and the east, it's a lovely necklace around Europe. And on core periphery dynamics, through history and across space, there have always been core periphery dynamics in economics, growth poles, in political science. Core periphery cleavage is one of the classical cleavages in the foundation of the modern nation state, and again in geography. So across so many disciplines, space and time, dynamics of centre and periphery. But in a way, with digitalisation, it does reorder what geography means. It isn't that geography no longer matters, of course it does, but it's not the beginning and the end. It's not deterministic. And I commend what this University Alliance wishes to do. It's important. It basically is a group of non-metropolitan universities. And non-metropolitan universities have an extraordinary role to play in ensuring that there is distributed regional development across Europe, that we don't all live in the metropolitan centres, that they don't over-dominate. And so what you're trying to do here, and the way in which it's being done, is to be commended, and I think will bear extraordinary fruit as you cooperate. And as I've always found in these networks, it's about the substance of what is done, but it's crucially about the people and the human connections that are made between colleagues, between students, that enrich all of our lives. And we saw with the music a Danish student playing Irish music, and I know we're going to see a Ukrainian dancer later. So the emphasis on multiculturalism and multiple languages, because again, if you look across the world with the dominance of English, one of Europe's great cultural strengths is the fact that it still is a place in the world where you have lots of languages, diversity of language, diversity of culture, and diversity of tradition. But that diversity does not mean that there can't be extraordinary cooperation and connectivity between them, and that's what I see in Emerge. So I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to congratulate all those involved in putting this alliance together, and I know it will be a great success. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. So we will now have the Charter of Common Values signing ceremony, which will be led by Professor Ricardo Coaubad from the University de Corona.
Good afternoon, tras mai, boa tarde, buenas tardes, bon après-midi, nos wat, good ettermiddag, bore echiacht, dobre večer, guten Abend oder guten Tag, goe vermiddag, goe jung, kalispera. Honorable authorities, esteemed colleagues, valued partners of the Emerge Alliance, associate members, and all those present. It is a profound honor to address you today at this landmark occasion in the life of our alliance. We gather not only to celebrate the formal launch of Emerge, but to affirm a shared commitment to a vision that transcends borders, disciplines, and institutions. Emerge, after the inspiring words of the Chancellor and the President of the University of Limerick, let me recall the meaning: empowering the margins of Europe through regional and global engagement. I'm especially privileged to lead the act of signing the Emerge Charter of Common Values, a document that encapsulates the very essence of our alliance. This charter is not merely a statement of intent. It is a declaration of purpose and a framework for action. Rooted in inclusion and equality, academic excellence, and innovation, sustainability and responsibility, collaborations and partnership, the Charter also embraces a digital approach that is ethical and inclusive, recognizes societal impact as a first mission, and upholds a commitment to continuous improvement. These values are not abstract ideals. They are guiding principles that will shape our decisions, our collaborations, and our contributions to the communities we serve. They reflect our belief that education must be transformative, that knowledge must be co-created, and that diversity in language, culture, and perspective is a strength to be celebrated. By endorsing this charter, we affirm our collective ambition to build a more connected, equitable, and resilient Europe. We commit to ensuring that these values are not spoken, but lived throughout teaching, our research, and our engagement with society. And now, with shared conviction and a deep sense of responsibility, we proceed to the signature of the Emerge Charter of Common Values. So I'm going to invite the members of this alliance to come and sign, I guess, the big document here. I don't know if we have the right pen to do that. I think this could be. And I will just invite everyone. Vincent Gosset, Université Rennes 2. Fotios Maris, Democritus University Thrace. Stine Rindvold, Inland University, Norway. Vladimir Hyatlovsky, Matejvel University. Christian Hipp, Europa Universiteit Flensburg. Georgios Leptos, Neapolis University Paphos. Christine Chauvin, University of Bretagne. Shane Kilcummins, University of Limerick. And on behalf of the University of A Coruña, I will sign myself. So that's all for the signatures.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. So I would now like to welcome Irina Kumluk, who is studying contemporary dance at UL. Irina has said, the learning process at this university is a combination of inspiration, discipline, and passion for one's beloved craft. Today, I will express my love through the movements of Ukrainian culture. I will show my heart and what gives me wings. Thank you very much for that wonderful performance, Arena. So I'd now like to welcome our lovely group of panellists. If I could please ask all the panellists to introduce yourselves and which university you're coming from.
Hello. Hello, I'm Morag Champy-McLean from Université de Bretagne Sud.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Sofia Daskou. I'm an associate professor at Neapolis University Paphos.
Hello, my name is Jan Talatsova, and I am from the Matthew Bell University in Banska Bystrica. I'm an institutional coordinator of eMERGE.
Hello, I'm Merle Struve from Europa-Universität Flensburg.
Hi, I'm Lucy from the University of Rennes.
And my name is Stine Grønvold, and I'm the Vice Rector of Education at the University of Inland Norway.
Fantastic. So I myself have been very excited about this part of the entire ceremony because I think as a student this gives us all a chance to learn a bit more about the eMERGE Alliance and everything that's in it. So to get started, Morag, mobility has long been a cornerstone of European cooperation. How does eMERGE aim to make mobility more meaningful and accessible?
All right, thank you very much for the question. And I would just like to say thank you very much for the speeches that were given earlier by the Chancellor and the President of the University, because that really sets the stage. It reminds us what we're doing here. We've got the Charter of Common Values, and we are here to speak about the work packages, so the work that we will do to lead up to what has been presented to us until now. So I'm the lead on Work Package 4, which is enhancing mobility. As we know, as has been said, Erasmus has existed for a very long time. We have had maybe people who are here who have benefited from it in the traditional way that we've had mobility, and that can be from a semester of immersion in a university where the student leaves their university, they do their full credits at their partner university, and then they come back home and they continue with their program. We also have students who've done mobility through their internship programs, perhaps, also financed by Erasmus funds. So those have been very meaningful for the students. They've built those projects, but we're looking to add more meaningfulness to the mobility of the students. How are we going to do that? In a few different ways. We're going to build other possible mobility solutions for the students to increase the number of students who can access these solutions. So we already have the European Union, the EU, that gives us the BIP programs, the blended intensive programs for short-term mobilities. We have students who are going to benefit from mobility inside their university. We're going to be building programs, which we'll go into detail later on, that will include mobility within the course. So that means that the students within the programs, more of them will be able to benefit from mobility. It may just be for one module or two modules. You don't have to go away for a whole semester. You don't have to be bilingual to go. We have many languages here, so we're going to integrate that into the programs we have to make it more meaningful, which means more students within a program will be able to benefit from this. They may not be able to travel for different reasons, which means that we can have some virtual mobility, some hybrid mobility. We can have buddy partners or systems that are put in place. And then we're going to make it more inclusive in the fact that we know that there are different barriers, and that's one of the responsibilities we have in Work Package 4, is to lift the barriers to as many as we can to have a large number of people who can benefit from the mobility. It's not just students, we also have staff, we also have teachers. So what can block people from being able to benefit from mobility? It could be their family situation, it could be finances, it could be people who are working. We know that thanks to eMERGE, we're going to have people from the professional community who will be able to benefit from short programs, from short-term programs. So that's going to open up mobility to people from our stakeholder community, our partner community, which is outside the university, and we're going to bring this partnership into the university. So this inclusiveness is a multi-level. It could be through perhaps disabilities that students may have, so we have to put in place accessibility for them. And as I said, it could be from personal situations. Maybe we have colleagues who have young families and they can't go away. We have to put something in place. And of course, the plurilingualism is also a problem. I live in France. We know the French were not the strongest in languages. So we have to anticipate the needs of our students and of our colleagues to put them in a position where they can benefit from this mobility. So we're going to put in language courses for them. So hopefully the offer that we're giving, the programs, will reach a larger group of people, and also putting in place to bring down these barriers that will hopefully enable us to open up the mobility to a larger number of people and create this inclusive university that we all aspire to.
Brilliant. Zanita, what opportunities will Emerge offer for students to engage in real-world, community-based learning across the Alliance?
Thank you very much for this question. Mathieu Bell University is responsible for work package 2, which is named Community Engagement. And I would like to remind something what we decided to put in DNA of our European University Alliance is that universities are not only providing educational services, they are not only focusing on research, but they are trying to fulfill also the third mission. And we decided to put this third mission as being the first one. So make a little bit more active, a little bit changing and with the priorities. So it means that community engagement is a very important part of the third mission will have impact on educational activities as well as on research activities. And when talking about opportunities for students, we can identify a lot of them, and we hope that the students will be much more engaged in activities which we can call like innovative pedagogical techniques like service learning. Some of them have already some experience with these activities, but what we want to achieve is the larger amount of students from different fields of studies which will specialize and which will be confronted with these methods. Then another aspect will be found in the internationally recognized supply of internships and fellowships, which we will develop together with our external stakeholders, with our external communities partners. So these internships will be in the community-based projects. And it will also have an impact on the skills of our students, which we believe it will be not only in hard skills and soft skills, but we believe that the social skills are extremely important facing to the new challenges what Mr. Gonzalez was talking about. So we really need new generation of students which will with maybe a higher level of tolerance, empathy, and emotional intelligence. So this is maybe a way how we can proceed. And last but not the least, we want to say that there are students which are engaged in research activities, PhD students, postdoc, and all the other actors, which also could have an better access comparing to the previous years, better access to the methods of participative research or citizen science. So these are like activities we are planning to develop, and all this in order not only to develop the students, but also to develop our regions to become much more productive, much more interesting, much more resilient. And of course, we want to not only to attract the talent, but also to keep the talent in our regions. So that's our objective.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. I think the opportunities are so exciting. Stina, if we meet in 10 years from now, how would you describe the changes we have been through? In what way can we spot the democratic values being brought forward by the students?
Thank you for that question, Ronan. And I know that you are an engaged student yourself, so you're a good example. In 10 years from now, I hope that we will be recognized for being universities that have created safe spaces for the students to engage, and to actually, that you can see from a student coming from our universities that they have lived the democratic value. And it means actually giving the floor to the students, like you have so explicitly and so nicely done at the launch, because it's about giving away some power and to open up the spaces and to make sure that all voices are heard. And you know that this is a hard thing to do. It's hard work. And I think it's really important that our students learn how to learn some methods to make sure that all voices are heard. Not only their own voices, but that they are aware that there are arguments that are out there that we need to put on the table to get a 360-degree debate on all the issues that we are into. So I see myself on the campuses in 10 years where we have created these spaces, and for the students, they will take them for granted and ask for more.
Fantastic. I think I completely agree myself. Probably the biggest advocate in the world for the power of student voice and in making sure that's being heard and integrated. So fantastic, fantastic. Lucy, how does plurilingualism support inclusion and a sense of belonging within such a diverse alliance?
Yes, so we're an alliance of 9 European countries, and I think many of us here in the room speak more languages than their own mother tongue. And I think we all understand that speaking another language, or speaking your mother tongue and speaking another language is part of your identity. So actually, research shows that when you switch language, you also kind of switch personality. So it's important that we can all express ourselves, and although we'll be speaking English, to work together, to collaborate, and yes, this will be like the main language. It's also important that we can all bring our own identity and our own singularity to the Alliance. So for this, there will be taster modules in all of the languages of the Alliance, and there will also be tandems, so people can learn languages with colleagues and with other students from other countries. So we'll support that plurilingualism. We'll also have English upskilling, so we'll have both sides. We will support people in improving their English, but also in being able to learn other languages. And there's also a policy from the European Union that's called 1+2. So the idea is that we have one mother tongue, or more for those who are lucky enough to have more, but one mother tongue, and then we should have +2 other languages. And that's ideally what we want to build also in the Alliance, that we can meet each other and maybe speak a few words in each other's languages. So, for example, I was speaking Spanish to my fellow Spanish colleagues today, and this is also part of me. This brings me back to when I was living there, and it takes me to a happy place, even if we're talking about something very serious. So that's what we want to foster here in the Alliance, that everyone can bring their singularity, their identity through languages and through their own culture. So yes, also, although English will be the main language, there will also be plenty of space for plurilingualism, and we will make sure that this is fostered and encouraged.
Brilliant, brilliant. Sophia, how can a European University Alliance reduce social exclusion and empower social groups?
Thank you for your question. This is probably the hardest question to answer because it's highly political and very relevant. The issue of social inclusion is a double-sided coin. In order to be able to engage and generate positive output and positive outcomes for inclusion, we have to understand what exclusion is. Because building inclusion is really the outcome of battling exclusion. Exclusion is very hard to define, and scientists in the disciplines of sociology, political science, psychology, etc., they've been trying to coin in a way that is commonly acceptable by all, and it's not an easy task. But the way we perceive exclusion in our alliance, in our family, because we're really a big multilingual family at this point, is a process of inequality that prohibits or if you like, does not permit certain individuals, because of their identity, to have access to social life. So in that sense, and we have all seen examples in our own countries of exclusion being displayed systematically, passively, or actively. And if we look at the work that has been done in the science of education and pedagogy, and building on the work of the Nobel Prize winner Sen, we are now thinking of adopting the approach of capabilities theory. So what we're hoping to do here is to, through the work that is done through the packages, and with the good intention of all the partners involved, to help students, staff, society, and excluded groups, as per the definition I gave earlier, to have access to generate, to build for themselves capabilities that transform the access they have to spaces, to institutions, and to markets, including the employment market. So it is a collective process, it's a collective effort, and it's rather hard because it's an imagined output. But it is a process, so we're going to take all the little steps necessary in order to ensure that we build towards the lack of exclusion.
Brilliant. Thank you. And finally, Merla, what makes it special to study at an eMERGE university from a course offerings perspective?
Thank you for this question. We already heard that students studying at one eMERGE university have great options to go abroad, different mobility options, so they can benefit from the course offerings of the eMERGE partner universities. We heard about language taster courses, different modules that are integrated or implemented. We are planning a joint eMERGE degree, so not just a double degree, but a degree where different universities have one common study program. And then, and this is a flagship initiative of the eMERGE project, we are introducing European academic pathways. These European academic pathways are giving a European dimension to different study programs that we do already have at our universities. For example, in Flensburg, we are introducing this pathway, this European track, in the teacher training programs. You at UL will introduce it in the social sciences and humanities. And in this European track, which leads to a certificate, students do benefit from theoretical courses dealing with European topics, European values, issues dealing with the European margins, and also very practical courses where we work closely with our regional partners. Janetta already mentioned the community engagement. There will be courses centered on service-based and challenge-based learning, which means that students in the European Pathway study programs will be able to solve real-world problems. And we also have different mobility options in this European pathway, short-term options, internships, and blended mobility options. So the pathway is something that you can experience on campus at your university, virtually, and also in a blended format. And by this European pathway, the European values have been mentioned before. They have been part of the project proposal, but they have become more and more relevant in the last months. And by the European pathway, we hope to empower the students with skills that they need in the future on the job market and in a very complex world.
Brilliant. Fantastic. I think we've definitely got what we came here to get in terms of getting a much more deep insight into why we're all here today. So thank you very much to our wonderful panel. That was brilliant. Thank you very much. So I would now like to invite Maria Miklapoulou from the Democritus University Thrace for a final reflection.
Thank you all. Thank you, Ronan. I think at least we've succeeded in persuading one of the students of the Alliance that we're doing a good job. And by closing this panel, I'd like to remind you of the points that were raised by my colleagues. So we first heard about meaningful mobility and lifting the barriers in mobility, about co-designing activities and service learning internships in community-based learning settings, along with participatory research, safe spaces where we have democratic environments where all voices and arguments are heard, and we still have students asking for more. We have languages and identities being supported, and singularities as well, following the policy of 1+2 that will make sense, I think, for most of us. We have the social inclusion goal by understanding exclusion and how it's manifested within our institutions and our lives. And as for education, we have the joint eMERGE degree. And also we have the European pathways for our existing degrees for the students to learn more about them and actually follow them at the end. And I think by closing, I'd like to say that we heard a lot of collaborated, value-driven and empowering the margin activities that I hope will empower ourselves also in order to build trust between us and transform our universities and the lived experience of our students and the future that they have ahead of them. We believe in an open and equal world, and this is a sentence that comes from the strategic plan of our university, where the values of eMERGE can flourish and can be transformed into skills and inspiration for our university communities, but mainly for our students, that they do have our future in their heads and their hands. And at the same time, I believe that we have them in our thoughts and in our hands. And I think I'd like to believe that it's a fair relationship, and a relationship that we all must give the best of us. And although this idea, the European alliances, has its origins and is designed to support European values and European countries, we now more than ever, I think, have to lift our vision and see the challenges that exist in the whole world. We cannot think of only Europe. Although we start and we support European values, we have to realize what's going on around the world. And in order to achieve this transformation described, we have to continue working along the path that eMERGE leads us to, and contribute the best that we can along this path. And we have to feel free to bring out what is needed to produce the changes we want at our institutions, and at the same time be committed to support the members of this alliance, the partners, in achieving the common transformative goals. So let's all find purpose and joy at the eMERGE journey that has just begun, and all for supporting our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Again, I'd just like to thank everyone for being a part of this wonderful launch today. For myself, it's truly an honour to be involved in such a historic day for not only my own institution, but all of our institutions. Just one thing to note before we get into a final musical performance from Ida and Simon to finish off this wonderful launch. Our photographers kindly requested that all the signatories of the Charter of Common Values remain back for a photo afterwards, if that's okay. So without no further ado, Ida and Simon to finish off our fantastic ceremony. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ronan, and thank you very much for having us. We're going to finish up with a Danish set of 2 Scottishes that is part of the Danish tradition where I come from.